That morning, I left the apartment a little later than usual. I hadn't eaten breakfast, barely had time to brush my hair, and forgot to take the umbrella I always kept by the door. But none of that mattered. The moment I stepped outside, I paused just for a breath. The air was crisp, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, the spring sunshine broke through the endless clouds that hung over Portland like a wet curtain. It was warm, not the suffocating warmth of summer, but the kind that wrapped gently around your shoulders, whispering that maybe, just maybe, today wouldn't be so bad. I walked faster, clutching my tote bag, checking the time. Only 2 minutes left before my shift at the pharmacy began. Luckily, it was just a few blocks away, tucked between a bakery and an old hardware store. As I passed the trees lining Hawthorne Boulevard, I noticed tiny green buds breaking through the winter gray branches. Birds were chirping. Strangers smiled at one another. It felt like the world had finally exhaled. "Good morning. You're glowing today," my coworker Lisa greeted me as I pushed through the door. "Let's see if the customers let me keep that glow," I joked, slipping into my white coat. I headed straight to the front to assist the early rush, the usual parade of elderly regulars stocking up on prescriptions just in case. I didn't mind. There was a rhythm to it, and I liked knowing I was helping people. Then my phone rang. I excused myself and answered quickly, thinking it might be Michael. Instead, a deep male voice greeted me. "Hello, is this Julia Dawson?" "Yes." "Who's calling?" "This is Brian Simmons. I'm Michael Dawson's supervisor." The smile on my face vanished. "What happened?" "There was an accident at the site. Your husband was hurt. He's been taken to Portland General." My heart dropped. I could barely speak. "Is he alive?" "Yes, but you should get there. Now." I didn't even hang up properly. I turned to Lisa, my hands trembling. "I have to go. It's Michael. There was an accident." She didn't ask questions. "Go. I'll cover for you." And just like that, the sunshine disappeared. The drive to Portland General felt endless, though I was barely aware of the streets flying past my window. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they turned white. I kept replaying the man's words over and over. "Your husband was hurt." Hurt how? Hurt where? Why was he even on a job site? Michael was an architectural designer. He spent his days drafting plans, meeting with clients, arguing over zoning permits, not hauling drywall or climbing scaffolding. None of this made sense. By the time I ran through the automatic glass doors of the ER, my lungs were burning, my legs shaking. At the reception desk, I barely managed to say my husband's name. "Michael Dawson. I think he was brought in just now." The nurse nodded. "He's in surgery. Trauma team took him back about 30 minutes ago." Surgery. I sank onto the nearest chair like the floor had vanished beneath me. My ears buzzed. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear what she said next. Something about signing papers and waiting upstairs. I nodded. I signed. I followed blindly. And then came the silence. That awful, endless hospital silence. The kind that makes the tick of the clock sound like a drumbeat. I sat alone in a waiting room with beige walls, plastic chairs, and a vending machine that hummed louder than it should. Every 5 minutes, I checked my phone. Every 10, I stood up to look down the hallway. 2 hours passed, then 3. Eventually, a man in scrubs walked toward me. He looked exhausted, his hair flattened under his surgical cap, his eyes red behind his glasses. "Mrs. Dawson?" I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over the chair. "Yes, I'm here." "Is he?" "He made it through surgery," the doctor said. "Your husband suffered a serious spinal injury. A large section of construction material collapsed and struck his lower back. Will he be okay?" I asked, "Will he walk?" The doctor hesitated. I saw it in his eyes before he spoke. "We stabilized him. We relieved the swelling. That part went as well as we could have hoped. But it's too early to know about long-term mobility. There's a chance of paralysis. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the man like maybe he'd say something different if I waited long enough. He's resting now. We'll know more when he wakes up. He gave a small, practiced smile. I nodded, somehow managing to thank him. When he turned and walked away, I finally sat back down and broke. My hands covered my face, and the tears came fast and hot. The sunlit morning felt like a lifetime ago. They let me see him the next morning. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night curled up in one of those awful waiting room chairs, my neck stiff, my back aching, my mind stuck in a loop of worst-case scenarios. But the moment the nurse told me he was awake and moved to recovery, I stood up and followed her without a word. He was in a private room now, clean, white, and too quiet. Machines beeped gently in the background. He looked pale, thinner somehow, like the accident had drained something more than blood from him. His eyes fluttered open as I stepped in. "Julia," he said weakly. "I'm here," I whispered, rushing to his side. I took his hand, cold and heavy in mine, and kissed his forehead. "How do you feel?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Michael didn't respond right away. He looked down at the blanket covering his legs. Then he looked back up at me, his expression clouded with something I couldn't quite read. Shame? Fear, maybe both. "I can't feel them," he finally said. "My legs. I can't feel anything below the waist." The words hit like a brick. I held my breath, blinked, and forced my voice to stay calm. "It could be the anesthesia," I said, my thumb brushing his hand. "The doctors said it's too soon to tell. You just had surgery. These things take time." "I asked the nurse," he whispered. She wouldn't say much, just kept repeating that the doctor would explain everything later. But I know. Something's wrong. Really wrong. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I couldn't. I leaned closer and said what I needed him to hear. Even if I wasn't sure I believed it yet. "We're going to get through this. You're not alone. I'll do whatever it takes to help you walk again, Michael. I promise." He nodded barely, then closed his eyes again. I stepped outside to make the calls. The first one was to Natalie, our daughter. She was still in college, nearly 100 miles away, and I didn't want to panic her, but she needed to know. She cried softly, then offered to come home. "No, sweetheart. You focus on your studies. I've got this," I told her, pretending my voice wasn't shaking. The second call was harder. Agnes. The moment I explained what had happened, her voice sharpened. "I'll be on the next bus. Someone needs to take care of my son." I tried to protest, but it was useless. She was coming. At exactly 7 a.m. the next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the door still in my robe, hair damp from a half-finished shower, and there she was, Agnes Dawson, standing tall with a suitcase in one hand and a garment bag in the other, like she was checking in for an extended stay at a hotel. I took the earliest Greyhound," she said without greeting. "He needs me." Before I could say a word, she brushed past me into the apartment, her perfume trailing behind like a warning. She dropped her bags by the hallway closet and began scanning the living room with a disapproving frown, as if sizing up all the ways I'd failed since the last time she visited. "I'll take the guest room," she announced. "Or rather, that couch, since you never thought to have a proper space ready." I bit my tongue. "Can I make you some coffee?" "No need. I brought my own grounds. Yours is too weak." I forced a smile, nodding like this wasn't already unbearable. By mid-morning, I'd called the pharmacy and requested a few days off. My manager was understanding, thank God. I didn't tell her the real reason wasn't just Michael's condition, but that I suddenly had to manage a second patient, one who didn't take kindly to silence or boundaries. At the hospital, Agnes transformed. She marched into Michael's room like a general inspecting her troops, smoothing his blanket, adjusting his fur, scolding the nurses for not answering call buttons fast enough. Within an hour, She had memorized the names of the entire floor staff and barked them like orders. "This mattress is too firm. My son has a spinal injury, not a paper cut," she snapped at one poor aide. I tried to step in to soften the edges, but it was like chasing a storm with a broom. Every time I spoke, she countered. Every suggestion I made, she rephrased it louder, as if it were her idea all along. Michael lay there, silent, eyes bouncing between us like a man watching a tennis match he never wanted to attend. He never intervened. Maybe he didn't have the energy, or maybe he didn't want to choose sides. Agnes, however, had already chosen hers, and it wasn't mine. Watching Agnes command the nurses and reposition Michael's pillow for the third time in 5 minutes, I felt that old, familiar tension crawl back into my chest, the kind that never really left, just buried itself under years of forced smiles and swallowed retorts. It wasn't always like this. Actually, that's not true. It was always like this. From the moment Michael first brought me home to meet her, I knew I wasn't what she wanted. I had dressed carefully, brought a bottle of wine, even baked a pie from scratch because Michael said his mom loved homemade things. She didn't even touch it. She looked me up and down and said, "So you're the one." "Humph, small town girl with big dreams, is that it?" I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Agnes never bothered with subtlety. Every dinner, every visit, she found new ways to remind me I wasn't part of their world. Her tone carried the kind of passive aggression that felt more like a scalpel than a knife. Precise, sharp, always leaving a mark. But the worst moment came one night, just before Michael proposed. I couldn't sleep. I got up to grab a glass of water and overheard them in the kitchen. The lights were off, but their voices carried. "She's not the one," Agnes said. "She's not good enough. She's not from our circle. She didn't go to the right schools. She has no real connections. You could do so much better." "She's kind, Mom," Michael replied. "She loves me." "She's convenient," Agnes snapped. "That's not the same." I stood frozen behind the hallway wall, glass in hand, heart cracking open. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't, because a week later, Michael got down on one knee in our tiny apartment and asked me to marry him. And I said yes because I loved him, and I wanted to believe that was enough. Our wedding was small but beautiful. Friends, a few coworkers, and yes, Agnes. She wore gray, like she was mourning, sat stiffly during the ceremony, didn't smile once during photos. Then came the toast. She stood glass in hand and said, "To Julia, you've managed to land yourself a wonderful man. He's loyal, hardworking, and far more generous than most. And to Michael, well, sweetheart, I always hoped you'd end up with someone extraordinary. But sometimes life gives us surprises." People laughed awkwardly. I held my breath and smiled through it, because that's what you do when your mother-in-law publicly tells a room full of people that her son settled. The days blurred into each other. I ran back and forth between the hospital and home, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, managing calls from the pharmacy, and trying to keep my voice steady when talking to Natalie so she wouldn't worry. Agnes stayed at the apartment, waiting for updates like some kind of royalty, criticizing the doctors and pacing the floor like she owned the place. Michael mostly slept. He was on pain meds, groggy and withdrawn. He'd nod when I talked, squeeze my hand now and then. But there was a heaviness in him, a silence that pressed down on both of us. One morning, Dr. Lee pulled me aside. "We've done all we can surgically," he said. "Now it's about rehabilitation, movement, neural stimulation. I'd like to recommend someone, Arthur Blake. He's a private physical therapist, but he's worked miracles in cases like your husband's." He handed me a card. I stared at the name for a long time. "How much does it cost?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be easy. "He's not cheap, but he's effective. I wouldn't suggest him otherwise." That night, I brought it up at dinner if you could call microwaved soup and silence a meal. "I think we should hire Arthur," I said. "The doctor said he's the best chance we have." Agnes scoffed. "We don't need some stranger poking at my son for $1,000 an hour." I used to be a gymnastics coach, remember? I know how to work with the body. I can help him. With respect, I said carefully, this isn't a sprained ankle or posture correction. It's spinal trauma. I gave birth to him, she snapped. I know what his body needs. Michael said nothing, so I made the decision myself. I called Arthur, booked the first session. We'd have to dip into savings, our emergency fund, the little nest egg we'd been building for years. But if it meant Michael could walk again, I'd spend every cent. Arthur started coming 3 times a week. He was professional, kind, methodical. He brought equipment, charts, exercises. He pushed Michael, but gently, encouragingly. Agnes loomed in the background during every visit, arms crossed, muttering things like waste of time, and I told you so under her breath. 2 months passed. Michael still couldn't walk. I was running on fumes. Between the hospital trips, managing the apartment, covering bills, stretching whatever was left in our savings, and keeping up appearances at work, I was crumbling. I'd lost weight without trying. My eyes stung constantly from lack of sleep. My back ached every time I bent down to tie my shoes. And still it was never enough. Agnes had become a permanent fixture in our home. Hovering, judging, nitpicking everything I did. You forgot to fold the towels the right way. You overcooked the rice. Your tone was too sharp with the nurse. Every word from her felt like a mosquito bite, small but relentless. And Michael, he barely spoke anymore. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask about Natalie. Didn't notice when I stayed late at the pharmacy just to have a few minutes of silence before coming home. Then one afternoon, while changing the bed sheets, I bent down to tuck the corner of the blanket and noticed something sticking out from under the bed. I reached for it, and my fingers closed around a glass bottle. Whiskey, half empty. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. Michael didn't even like whiskey, at least he hadn't before. My hands were shaking when I walked into the living room, holding it out. "What is this?" I asked. Michael didn't look surprised, just tired. "Helps with the pain. There's medication for that. Prescribed. Monitored. It's not enough." I swallowed hard. "You're drinking alone. Lying about it. Hiding it from me. That's not just about pain, Michael." He looked away. I stood there, heart pounding, and for the first time, I let myself say the thing I'd been avoiding. If you keep going down this path, I can't do this anymore. I won't stand by and watch you destroy yourself. I love you, but I won't drown with you. If something doesn't change, maybe we need time apart. There was a long silence. Then Agnes's voice cut through the air like a whip. "So that's it? You're giving up? Leaving him now when he needs you most? What kind of wife walks out on her husband when he's down?" I turned slowly toward her. "The kind who's been holding everything together while he gave up," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure if I was angry or just heartbroken. A few days after the whiskey incident, Dr. Lee pulled me aside again. His expression was gentle but firm. The way people look at you when they're about to tell you something you won't want to hear. "We've made good progress with therapy," he said. "But to truly restore function, Michael may need spinal stabilization surgery. It's not guaranteed to work, but without it, his chances of walking again are slim." I felt my stomach twist. "Will insurance cover it?" He hesitated. "Not entirely. And the specialists involved, the post-op care, the inpatient rehab, it adds up quickly. I just wanted to be honest with you." He gave me a folder with referrals and estimated costs. I thanked him, smiled politely, then went straight to the stairwell and cried until my chest hurt. We didn't have that kind of money. Not anymore. That night, after Michael had gone to bed and Agnes was holed up in the guest room watching reruns on her tablet, I sat alone at the kitchen table and made a list. Expenses, bills, what was left in our savings. It didn't add up. So I did what I had to do. I started looking for a second job. Not something big, just something quiet, part-time. A few hours in the evenings, maybe weekends. I didn't care what it was, cleaning, stocking shelves. anything that paid in cash or weekly checks. At the pharmacy the next day, during my lunch break, a woman rushed in asking for painkillers. I handed her the bottle, and as she looked up to say thank you, we both froze. "Julia," she said, lowering her sunglasses, "is that you?" It took me a second. Then I saw it. Behind the sleek blonde hair and designer blazer was Ina Harper. We went to high school together. She used to be the quiet girl with freckles and braces. Now she looked like she ran half the city. "Oh my God, I can't believe this," she said. "You still live in Portland." We talked for a minute before my break ended. She asked about Michael, and I gave her the edited version. Then she surprised me. "I manage a boutique hotel downtown. We've been having turnover with our cleaning staff. It's not glamorous, but the pay's decent and the hours are flexible. Interested?" I nodded before she even finished. "I am. I really am." "Great. Come in tomorrow. I'll show you around." I didn't tell Michael or Agnes. I just packed my sneakers, changed into scrubs after my pharmacy shift, and started working both jobs. Because if no one else was going to save him, I would. It was my 10th straight day without a break. I'd clocked out of the pharmacy at 4 p.m., changed in the staff bathroom, grabbed a granola bar, and headed straight to the hotel. My feet ached, my lower back was screaming, and I still had 6 rooms to clean before I could even think about rest. Ina had texted earlier, "You're on 3rd floor, detail tonight. 307 through 312. The 3rd floor was always the worst. Business travelers, expensive rooms, twice the mess. But I didn't complain. I needed the hours. Room 310 was near the end of the hall. I knocked twice, waited, then swiped the keycard. "Housekeeping," I called out. No answer. I stepped inside, dragging the cart behind me, ready to do the usual. Strip the bed, empty trash, check the minibar. But I stopped cold. There, standing near the window, was Michael, my husband, on his feet, not in a wheelchair, not struggling, not holding on to anything, standing, walking, moving with ease. And he wasn't alone. A young woman, blonde, maybe mid-20s, legs like a model and wearing a silk robe, had her arms draped around his shoulders. She was laughing. He was smiling. Their faces were inches apart. Neither of them noticed me right away. I was frozen in the doorway, gripping the handle of the cart like it could hold me upright. For a second, I thought I might be dreaming, hallucinating. Then Michael turned. His smile disappeared. "Julia!" My name in his voice snapped me back. I didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just turned around and walked out. Fast. My breath caught in my throat, my chest tightening with each step. I didn't want him to see me cry. I didn't want to give him that. The elevator took too long, so I ran down the stairs, out through the lobby, into the street. It was dark now. The air was colder than I remembered. And just like that, the worst night of my life began. I didn't get far, just a block down the street before I heard him behind me. His voice calling my name, his footsteps growing louder, faster. "Julia, wait. Please wait." I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear what kind of lie he was about to sell me this time. He jogged up beside me, slightly breathless but very much functional. No cane, no brace, no limp, just a man who had been pretending to be broken. "Please," he said again, "it's not what you think." I stared at him. "Really? Because it looks a lot like you walking just fine in a hotel room with another woman wrapped around you." He raised both hands like a cop defusing a standoff. Okay, I know how it looks, but it wasn't, God, it wasn't about her." I laughed, short, bitter. "She's not the point." I asked. "No, I mean she is, but not like that." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. I needed to know if you'd still love me, if you'd stay. I was scared, Julia, scared that if I couldn't walk, you'd leave." I blinked. "So you liet. You let me believe you were paralyzed. You let me take care of you. Work 2 jobs. Give up everything. Just so you could test me." He flinched. "Arthur helped more than we expected. I was walking again weeks ago. But I wasn't ready to tell you. I thought if I told you too soon, maybe you'd walk away anyway. I needed to be sure." I shook my head, mouth dry. "And the girl?" I asked. His eyes dropped. "Alyssa. She's the daughter of my old boss. I was trying to get my job back. She offered to speak to her dad on my behalf. That's all." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's all? She was practically draped over you." "She said that's how her father listens," he muttered. I didn't do anything." "You didn't have to," I whispered. "You already did enough." The hurt wasn't just about the affair, real or not. It was the betrayal of trust, the manipulation, the fact that while I was scrubbing hotel floors to pay for a surgery he no longer needed, he was playing games with my heart and smiling through it. By the time I got home, I was shaking with everything I hadn't said. The argument I thought I would have with Michael, about betrayal, about humiliation, about how utterly small he'd made me feel, burned just beneath the surface. I walked through the door ready to scream, but my phone rang before I could even take off my coat. "Natalie." I answered immediately. "Honey." She was crying. I could hear it in her breath. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't know who else to call. My heart clenched. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice cracking. "And I don't want to be." I sank into the edge of the couch, my anger with Michael evaporating like smoke. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't know what to do," she said. "Max is scared. I'm scared. We're still in school. It's the worst timing. I feel like I ruined everything." I closed my eyes, held the phone tighter. "You didn't ruin anything," I said gently. "You just need to breathe. We'll figure this out together." "I've been thinking about ending it," she admitted. "I know that sounds awful, but no," I interrupted softly. "It doesn't sound awful. It sounds honest. But don't make that decision alone. Let's talk. Face to face. Can I come see you?" She paused. "Really? I'll be there tomorrow. We'll talk everything through. And listen, Nat, if you decide to keep the baby, I'll help you. You won't be alone." She cried harder, this time with relief. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I had spent so long trying to save a man who didn't want saving, and completely forgot I already had someone worth fighting for. Someone who needed me, who trusted me, who still believed I was good. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I packed a single suitcase. I left a note on the kitchen table, short, direct, final. I told Michael I was filing for divorce, that I didn't hate him, but I no longer knew who he was, and that I refused to keep living in a home built on lies. I didn't look back. I moved 2 weeks later, a quiet city not too far from Natalie's campus, just enough to give her space, but close enough to be there when she needed me. With the money from the divorce settlement, what little was left after the lawyers and the hospital bills, I bought a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of an aging brick complex. The walls were thin. The plumbing groaned every time I ran hot water, but there was a small balcony that caught the morning sun, and the living room smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Natalie stayed with me for the final months of her pregnancy. We cooked together, folded baby clothes, and talked about everything: her fears, her hopes, the messy pain we both carried. Some nights we cried. Some nights we laughed until our stomachs hurt. And slowly, quietly, something began to heal inside both of us. When the baby finally arrived, it was a rainy afternoon in late March. I held her hand through the contractions, whispered encouragements between each breath, and when the doctor placed that tiny, wriggling boy on her chest, I thought my heart might break from how much love I felt in that moment. She named him Elijah. 2 days later, they were discharged, and I brought them home. That morning, I stood by the window, rocking Elijah in my arms. He was warm, soft, impossibly small. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Pale sunlight spilled through the thin curtains, casting a golden haze across the room. Natalie was asleep in the next room, exhausted but peaceful. And me? I was no longer angry, no longer afraid. I didn't carry the weight of Michael's betrayal or Agnes's cruelty anymore. I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was learning to love what I'd found. I looked down at my grandson, and a verse from long ago surfaced in my mind, one I hadn't thought about in years, one I didn't even know I'd remembered. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147, verse 3, I whispered it softly, almost without thinking. And for the first time in a very long while, I smiled and truly meant it. The morning sun filtered lazily through the cream-colored curtains of the Boulder Hillside Hotel. Clara Bennett sat at the edge of the bed, still in the silk robe she'd worn while getting ready for the wedding the night before. Her heels were tossed in the corner. Her carefully curled hair was now a soft mess. The smile she had worn all day for her brother's wedding had long disappeared, replaced by the quiet exhaustion of someone who had given too much. She reached for her phone to check out of the hotel and pay the bill. That's when everything changed. She opened her banking app out of habit, but the number that stared back at her didn't make sense. Her balance had dropped to $1,632.34. Just last weekend, it had been over $10,000. Her breath hitched. She blinked, thinking there must be a glitch, a misread, a joke. Her thumb hovered over the Transactions tab, and then she whispered almost to herself. David, her boyfriend, David Callahan, was buttoning up his shirt across the room. He turned at the sound of her voice, immediately catching the panic in her tone. What is it? My account, Clara said slowly. 8,400. It's gone. David crossed the room in seconds, took the phone from her hand, and scrolled quickly through the transaction history. His brows furrowed. These transfers, you didn't do these? Clara shook her head. No, the screen showed 3 major withdrawals made in the span of 20 minutes, all timestamped just the night before. $2,000 to a credit card in the name of Lauren Hughes, her older sister, for $1,000 to an account under Carter Hughes, her brother-in-law, and $2,400 to Barbara Bennett, her mother. Clara's lips parted, but no words came out. She remembered taking a quick shower while David had stepped out to get them late-night tea. Her phone had been on the nightstand. David's voice dropped, clipped and sharp. That's identity theft. Unauthorized access. Clara stared at the wall. The nausea came in waves. Just then her phone rang. It was her mother. Still in a daze, Clara answered, putting it on speaker. Hi, sweetheart, Barbara chirped. Just wanted to say thank you again for yesterday. Ethan looked so happy. Clara sat up straighter. Mom, I need to ask you something. Barbara hummed lightly. There were several transfers made from my account last night. Thousands of dollars. Do you know anything about that? There was a pause and then a bright laugh. Oh, that. Honestly, I thought it'd be more than that. Lauren said your account had more than she expected, so we just split it up. It's for Ethan, honey. Think of it as your wedding gift. Clara's blood ran cold. What? Her voice cracked. Carter's voice echoed faintly in the background. You're always loaded, but don't really use it. It was for a good cause. Come on. David stepped closer. His jaw was locked, his voice low but firm. That's theft. What you did is a federal crime. Barbara's tone shifted slightly, cooler now. Let's not be dramatic. We're family. Clara's always been self-focused. This is her way of helping. She's single, she earns well. Of course, she should contribute. Clara reached for the phone, hands trembling. How did you even get into my account? Lauren's voice chimed in. I used your phone. Your password hasn't changed in years. It was easy, And with that, the line went dead. For a long moment, neither of them moved. David was the first to speak. We need to leave. But not home, not yet. Clara nodded slowly, numbness flooding her limbs. Her voice came out like a whisper, but her words were steel. We're going to my parents' house. I want to hear them say it to my face. David placed a hand on her shoulder. Stay calm, okay? No matter what happens, stay calm. Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to, because in that moment, something inside her had changed. This wasn't just about the money. It was about what the money revealed, and what it had always meant to them. The drive to her childhood home in southeast Denver felt longer than it should have. Clara didn't speak. Her mind reeled with fragmented memories. Christmas mornings, birthday dinners, the laughter around that living room. All now overlaid with betrayal. David drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally brushing her knee. When they pulled into the driveway, Clara froze. It was a modest brick house with white shutters, utterly ordinary. But today it looked like a fortress of hypocrisy. David cut the engine. Are you sure about this? Clara nodded. They owe me an explanation. She stepped out, each footfall heavy, purposeful. David followed, closely behind. Before they reached the door, it creaked open. Her father, Philip Bennett, stood there in his flannel robe, coffee in hand, as if this were just any other Saturday. Clara, I thought you and David were heading back to the city. She walked past him without a word. Her boots echoed against the hardwood floors as she entered the living room. Lauren was sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling her phone. Carter sat beside her, relaxed, sipping coffee from a mug that read, World's Best Dad. Barbara was fluffing a pillow. They all looked up and froze. Clara didn't sit. How did you access my account? Lauren blinked. I already told you. Your phone. While you were showering. The password was still your graduation year. Don't look so shocked. Clara's voice trembled. Why would you do that? Carter leaned back, one arm draped casually over the sofa. Because we needed it. Do you know how expensive it is raising kids? Clara, you live alone. You travel. You buy designer handbags and espresso machines. Meanwhile, we're drowning in expenses. Clara stared at him. So that gives you the right to steal from me? Barbara spoke up, her tone soft and dismissive. Clara, don't make this bigger than it is. We've always supported each other. It's what families do. You're blowing this out of proportion. David stepped forward. No, she's not. What you did was unauthorized access and theft. That's a criminal offense. Philip, who had wandered back into the room, lowered his newspaper. Son, don't bring the law into family matters. Then maybe you should have acted like family, Clara snapped. Lauren scoffed. Oh, please. You think you're better than us because you make 6 figures and live in a high-rise? We're the ones struggling. You think gifts and birthday checks make you superior? That's just your duty. You don't have a family of your own. You should help the one you came from. Clara's breath caught. For years, she had tried to be generous. She bought Harry a laptop for school. She paid for Margaret's ballet lessons when Lauren and Carter couldn't. She thought she was helping, not paying rent for love. Unbelievable, she said quietly. You don't even see it. See what? Barbara asked, arms folded. That I was never your daughter, just your donor. The room fell silent. You think I'm selfish because I kept some part of my life just for me. Because I didn't hand over every dollar the second you hinted. But what about you? What kind of people steal in the night and call it love? Barbara shook her head. We didn't steal. We borrowed. David let out a short laugh. Borrowed? With no intent to return it? With deception and unauthorized use? That's not borrowing. That's criminal. Philip stood up. You need to leave, both of you. This house doesn't need threats or drama. David turned to Clara. You ready? She didn't respond. She looked at the faces around the room. Her sister's disdain, her mother's detachment, her father's indifference, her brother-in-law's smug entitlement. This was her family, and they didn't even flinch. "We're done here," she said, turning for the door. "But this isn't over." As they stepped outside, Carter called out, "Don't be so mad, Clara." "With your salary. You'll make it back in no time." Clara stopped, but didn't turn around. "No," she said, "you won't." And with that, she closed the car door, severing something silent but final. The drive back to Denver was silent, but Clara's thoughts were anything but. She stared out the window, her reflection staring back at her with hollow eyes. Her family had just stolen from her, lied to her, justified it, and somehow still believed they had done nothing wrong. Every word they said echoed in her mind, not with confusion, but with clarity. David's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his jaw set. When they got back to Clara's apartment, he placed her phone on the kitchen counter and poured 2 glasses of water. "Do you want to talk?" Clara shook her head. "Not yet." Instead, she went to her desk and pulled out a worn folder. She hadn't touched it in years. It held past bank statements, notes from when she helped Lauren with bills, payment confirmations for Ethan's college prep program, even old Venmo transfers labeled mom's meds or ballet tuition. She flipped through the pages, one after another, until her fingers trembled. There was so much, too much. David approached quietly. "I know this is overwhelming, but Clara, I need to ask you something. What do you want to do?" She looked up. "I don't know. Do you want to let this go?" Clara hesitated. "They're my family, David." He crouched down next to her chair, meeting her eyes. "If a stranger took $8,400 from you while you were in the shower, would you go to the police?" "Of course." "Then why not now?" "Because it's complicated." "No, it's not. It's betrayal, and you didn't deserve it." Clara closed her eyes. She thought back to Lauren's voice. "You're single, you make a high salary, of course you should help." The way Carter had laughed as if she were overreacting, her mother's indifference, her father's silence, and suddenly it wasn't just about the $8,400. It was about every time they had made her feel guilty for being successful, for being independent, for simply living her own life. She turned back to the folder. "I want to know how far this goes." David nodded. "Then let's find out." For the next few hours, Clara dug into 3 years' worth of financial records. She built spreadsheets, highlighted patterns. Each time she paused, David was there with coffee, tissues, or silent support. By evening, she had a rough total. Over $15,000 in requests, loans, or emergencies from her family, most of which had never been repaid. But what struck her wasn't the number. It was the method. They always started with warmth. "We miss you. Harry's birthday is coming up. He really hopes you'll send something nice." Then came the guilt. "It's not easy raising kids. You wouldn't understand." And if she hesitated, the tone shifted. "You've changed. You're so selfish now. You don't care about family anymore." It wasn't just manipulation. It was emotional conditioning. David sat beside her, flipping through the documents. "You see it now, don't you?" Clara nodded. "They trained me to say yes, to ignore my own limits. And I thought I was being loving when I was just being used." He reached for her hand. "This isn't just theft. It's abuse. And it's time you fought back." Clara was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "Will you help me?" David didn't hesitate. Every step of the way. The next morning, David made a call to one of his colleagues at his law firm, a woman named Camille Dorsey, a seasoned financial crime attorney. That afternoon, she met them in their living room. After reviewing Clara's documents, Camille leaned back. "Clara, this is a textbook case of familial financial abuse. Just because they're blood doesn't mean they're allowed to steal from you." Clara hesitated, "But reporting them, it'll destroy what's left of my family." Camille didn't flinch. They destroyed it the moment they decided you were a wallet, not a daughter. Clara looked down at the pile of evidence she had gathered. She saw not just numbers and names, but years of being minimized, drained, manipulated. She took a deep breath. Let's do it. I'm ready. And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. Clara sat on the edge of her couch as Detective Selena Ward laid out a notepad, a recorder, and a quiet confidence that instantly filled the room. She wore no uniform, just a dark blazer, a simple ponytail, and eyes that had seen stories like Clara's more times than they should have. "Ms. Bennett," Selena began, "please walk me through what happened from the very beginning." Clara took a breath, steadying her voice. "It was the morning after my brother's wedding. I opened my banking app, and $8,400 was gone. The transactions were made while I was showering, all to members of my own family." Selena nodded, taking notes. "You believe the access to your account was unauthorized?" "I'm sure of it. My sister used my phone without permission. She knew my password, something I hadn't changed in years. She made the transfers herself. I confronted them. They admitted everything, but said it was family duty, like I owed them." Selena's pen paused for a moment. "You're not the first case like this, but you are one of the rare ones willing to come forward." "Beside Clara," David added, "we've documented all communications, texts, emails, bank statements over the past 3 years. The pattern is extensive and consistent." Selena reviewed the folders, flipping through the highlighted statements, annotated spreadsheets, and screenshots. Her face remained unreadable. But then she closed the folder gently and looked up. "This is clear evidence of financial exploitation, unauthorized access, theft, coercive behavior, possibly even conspiracy, depending on who coordinated what." Clara's stomach tightened. "What happens now?" "First, a formal preliminary investigation. That includes contacting involved parties, securing digital records, and verifying the legal framework for prosecution. If sufficient evidence is found, we'll forward the case to the district attorney's office." David placed a comforting hand on Clara's back. She didn't flinch, but she didn't relax either. Selena continued, "I have to ask, are you emotionally prepared for what comes next? These are your parents, your sister. Once we initiate the process, there's no undoing it." Clara looked down at her hands. "I don't think I am, but I also know I wasn't emotionally prepared to be robbed by them, and yet they did it anyway." Selena gave a small nod, then reached into her bag and pulled out a few forms. "These are privacy release forms. They'll allow us to subpoena the account logs and transaction histories. Sign when you're ready." Clara picked up the pen and, with only a brief pause, signed each line. The next morning, Clara's phone vibrated nonstop. Missed calls, dozens of texts, all from her family. "Lauren, Anna, did you seriously go to the police? Are you insane? You're going to ruin everything. Carter, my account's been frozen. How am I supposed to pay bills? You've crossed a line. Barbara, the police came to the house. Your father's heart is acting up again. What will the neighbors think? Is that what you want, to kill your father over a few dollars?" Clara replied only once to all of them. "That's your own doing. Don't contact me again." By the afternoon, there was a knock on her apartment door. Clara opened it slowly, already knowing who it would be. Lauren stood there, mascara streaked, eyes bloodshot, and rage clinging to every syllable. "What the hell are you doing?" "We're family." Clara didn't move. "You want to talk? I'll call David." Lauren laughed bitterly. "That lawyer? He's brainwashed you. You used to care." "I still care," Clara said softly, "but caring doesn't mean handing over my life to people who hurt me." Lauren's voice rose. "We didn't hurt you. We asked for help. You stole from me." Lauren's face darkened. "You've changed." Clara didn't hesitate. "That's right. I've changed because you made me." And for the first time, She closed the door in her sister's face without a shred of guilt. A few days after slamming the door on Lauren, Clara stood in her kitchen, staring at a cup of untouched tea. The apartment was quiet, almost unnaturally so. David was working from his office down the hall, giving her space. But space didn't quiet the noise inside her chest. Then the doorbell rang. Clara opened it to find her younger brother, Ethan, standing with his hands deep in the pockets of his hoodie, his eyes full of shame. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. "Yeah, of course." Ethan sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't belong there. "I heard everything about the police investigation, the accounts, Lauren freaking out." Clara folded her arms. "I didn't have a choice." He nodded. "I know, and I want you to know something. I didn't ask them to do any of this. The money, I never wanted that. I didn't know they'd take it from you." Clara looked at him. "Did you know they were planning it?" Ethan hesitated. Then, quietly, "I overheard Lauren and Carter talking about it. A week before the wedding. They said you'd never press charges if it was just a family gift. I didn't think they'd actually do it, and I didn't want to ruin the wedding by confronting them." Clara's voice was hollow. "So you stayed quiet." "I was scared. I didn't want to tear the family apart." Clara sat beside him. "But it already was torn, Ethan. You just didn't see it yet." He looked at the floor. "I want to help. I don't know what I can do, but I'll testify. I'll tell the truth." Clara's breath caught. "They'll disown you too." He gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe. But at least I'll still have my integrity. And maybe you." Clara squeezed his hand. "You always have me." Later that evening, as the sky darkened over Denver, her phone rang again. This time from a number she hadn't seen in weeks. Her father. Clara stared at the screen before answering. "Clara!" Philip's voice came through, weary and strained. "Why are you doing this?" Clara sat down slowly. "You know why. They searched our house. The police took our computers. Your mother hasn't slept in days. Lauren is falling apart. Carter's been suspended from work. And the mortgage company's calling us now. Is this what you wanted?" "No," Clara said, her voice level. "But it's what you caused." There was a long silence. Then, quietly, he said, "You're no longer our daughter." The words hit like cold steel. "You betrayed your family," Philip continued. "You'll never be welcome here again." He hung up. Clara didn't cry. She expected to. She waited for the ache in her chest to crush her. But instead, she felt weightless, unshackled, as if the chain they'd held around her neck for years had finally snapped. The next morning, Detective Selena Ward called. "Clara, we've officially filed charges against Lauren and Carter. Unauthorized access, theft, and conspiracy. Your parents, we don't have enough to charge them criminally, but they may still face civil liability. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week." "Thank you," Clara said, her voice steady. Selena paused. "Have you experienced any additional pressure or threats from them?" Clara remembered her father's final words. "They've disowned me," she said softly. "I'm sorry," Selena said gently. "If needed, we can file a restraining order." Clara didn't answer immediately. She looked around her apartment, her own space, her own rules, her own silence. "I think I'm okay. For now." That night, Clara told David everything.